Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're moving past the motivational posters, the glossy corporate brochures.
Right.
We are deep diving into the structural blueprints required to build truly resilient teams.
And this is so key. We have to shift the focus away from individual grit, that solitary, exhausting superpower.
Exactly, and start examining the shared organizational capacity that allows a group of people to not just endure pressure, but to actually grow stronger because of it.
That shift is absolutely the decisive edge in today's environment. I mean, think about where organizations spend their resources.
It's all strategy, innovation, productivity.
Right. And the sources we reviewed, they argue that resilience isn't just a nice byproduct of good management. It is the quiet foundational force that makes all those other things even possible.
And the environment we're in now is it's constant flux.
High flux is the perfect term for it.
Wow.
Rapid market shifts, exponential tech changes, rising expectations, and if your team can't adapt together, everything else just crumbles.
So that's a core mission of this deep dive. We're moving past the secular idea that resilience is just a nice to have, something for, an HR training day.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to find the architectural drawings, the counterintuitive facts that explain why some teams merely survive a crisis, limping back to the start, while others really do rise stronger after every setback.
So if resilience is structural, what are the load-bearing elements? That's the question.
When most of us try to define resilience, our mind, it immediately goes to an individual trait, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The go-to metaphor is always a material.
Like a steel spring or a rubber band, something that absorbs energy, stretches, and then snap, it's back to its original shape.
It's all about returning to stasis.
Exactly, spaces.
And for human teams, that definition just falls critically short. I mean, if your team just survives a crisis and goes back to who they were before the storm hit, you've only experienced stasis.
You haven't grown.
You haven't grown at all. True resilience, according to these sources, is the capacity to flourish under pressure and to do it together. It demands a genuine structural transformation, not just absorption.
This is where the source material brought in that really fascinating parallel from agriculture.
The agricultural metaphor, yes. So imagine a young tree facing persistent, heavy wind.
Right?
If it were just about bouncing back, the tree would just, wait for the wind to stop. But what actually happens is a process called thigmomorphogenesis.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But the concept is amazing. The stress of the wind actually stimulates hormones that thicken the cell walls. They push roots deeper and wider. They make the trunk stronger.
So the wind isn't just an interruption. It's actually forcing the tree to undergo an internal irreversible structural upgrade.
Precisely. The crisis is not an interruption to the team's work. It is the gymnasium of your culture. You use that resistance to build greater capacity.
And this connects to that progression you mentioned from the book of James.
Yes. The trial leads to perseverance. And that perseverance, it leads to maturity, completeness. The team becomes structurally superior, more whole than it was before the pressure.
That completely reframes struggle. It means the key takeaway for you listening is that resilience is fundamentally a community project.
Yes. It's not about the lone genius leader being tough.
No, it's sustained by these horizontal bonds of trust and psychological safety, and that culture has to flow from leadership down. It's built by grace, not just individual grit. Okay, so building on that, let's talk about the leadership challenge. We often hold up this lone genius myth.
The shock absorber in chief.
Right, the leader who has to hide all their doubts, put on this facade of unwavering certainty, and try to shield the team from reality.
But if that one individual cracks,
The whole system collapses. It sounds like repression, and repression is, by definition, brittle, isn't it?
it is intensely brittle.
Mhm.
And that fragility, it stems from the idolatry of the individual. The sources, when they look for a foundational model, they actually look at the Trinity.
Okay, so a community, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, existing in mutual indwelling. The Greek term was perichoresis.
Perichoresis. It's a dense theological term, I know.
So how does mutual indwelling translate into a practical team dynamic for, say, an organization facing layoffs?
Well, it translates into a structural design that has no competition among its parts
Okay.
and mutual glorification. So, recognizing the strength each part brings and a unified will. In practical terms, this means power is decentralized, risk is shared, and if one part is failing, the others rush in to support it, not to compete with it.
So the leader isn't the person carrying the full weight of the crisis.
No, they're the system architect who ensures the structure is balanced, The leader functions as the thermostat, setting the emotional temperature.
Instead of being the thermometer, which just reflects all the ambient anxiety in the room.
Exactly. When a crisis hits, you need regulation, not just visceral reaction. And we found this really practical mechanism for this called the wait rule. First, the leader has to wait to react. Give yourself a mandatory 30 minutes, maybe 24 hours, before you communicate bad news broadly.
Oh, I can immediately think of about 3 emails I wish I had waited on. That pause is vital. What's the second wait?
The second is you have to weight the situation. You pause and ask, is this really a catastrophe that requires a fundamental shift? Or is it a serious complication that we can manage?
Because leaders often mistake complications for catastrophes
Right.
and trigger team-wide panic.
And unnecessary burnout. Which brings us to the most powerful tool a leader has, and it's, ironically, selective vulnerability. The leader has to be reachable.
You cited Paul in 2 Corinthians, where he admitted being under pressure far beyond our ability to endure. I mean, he said he despaired of life itself.
Right.
That's radical honesty.
It is. He admitted the severity of the pain. We are broken, but then immediately pivoted to the source of his hope.
So he's creating what you'd call realistic hope.
Exactly. It validates the difficulty. This pain is real, while asserting confidence in the underlying process.
But doesn't that vulnerability risk being seen as weakness? Especially in a world where perceived competence is everything.
That's the beauty of it being selective. When a leader admits a struggle, shares the thorn, it grants the entire team immediate permission to be honest about their own struggles.
This shifts the culture.
It completely shifts the culture. You move away from performative competence, that corporate showcase where everyone pretends they're fine, and you move into an honest workshop culture.
A workshop where issues are actually discussed openly.
Right. You stop wasting energy on hiding things and you start spending it on solving them.
So if the leader is setting the emotional temperature, let's move to the blueprints, the actual structural elements. The sources contrast two famous projects, the Tower of Babel and Pentecost.
Right.
Babel was, on paper, hyper-efficient, clear goal, unified language, strong motivation. So why did that model fail?
It failed because of uniformity. We call it the homogeneity trap. They all spoke the same, they thought the same, which is, look, it's great for short-term speed.
But terrible for adaptability.
Awful. When external variables changed, they couldn't pivot.
And Pentecost.
Pentecost succeeded through radical diversity.
Yeah.
You had Parthians, Medes, Elamites, all speaking different languages but sharing one unified spirit. Their differences, sanctified by that purpose, became their survival mechanism.
So when that team scattered under persecution, they didn't just collapse.
No, they planted new seeds everywhere. Diversity equals anti-fragility.
That's a critical lesson. So how do we diagnose if a team is brittle right now, even if it looks highly functional?
We look for symptoms of the brittle high-performance team.
Okay, like what?
Silence is a big one.
Yeah.
No one pushes back on a flawed idea. Then silos people protecting their turf or their data, and of course, high turnover.
And the sources identify 4 major markers that predict a crash is coming.
Yes. We should probably slow down and define these.
Let's do it. What's the first marker of fragility?
The first is the idolatry of agreement. It's when dissenting views are just immediately shut down because the team thinks harmony is more important than reality.
So no one red teams an idea.
Nobody. Everyone just smiles and walks off the cliff together.
Okay, and the second marker?
The absence of slack. This is the choice to run every employee at 105% capacity.
Which seems efficient in the short term.
Until a crisis hits, a pandemic, a supply chain issue, and there is zero capacity to absorb the shock. The whole system just snaps.
Third marker. Evaluation based on activity, not fruit.
Oh, this is a big one. It's a culture that rewards busyness, hours clocked, rather than strategic impact. It encourages performative work.
Looking busy instead of actually moving the mission forward.
Right. And finally, the hidden tax of unresolved conflict.
So every disagreement that gets swept under the rug.
It doesn't just disappear. It sits in the team's emotional overhead, draining energy. It shows up as passive aggression, distrust, exhaustion. It's a constant heavy tax.
Which brings us to the core condition required for resilience. Psychological safety. The sources call this the secular term for grace. So if you operate a culture of fear, of punishment, what happens to the team's collective intelligence?
Well, fear triggers the amygdala, the survival part of the brain, and it shuts down the prefrontal cortex, your center for logic, creativity, problem solving. The formula is simple. A fearful team is a stupid team.
They can only comply.
Right? And compliance is fragile. It's not resilient.
So this requires decoupling mistakes from retribution. What's the difference between correction and punishment?
Correction is restorative. It focuses on fixing the system. It asks what went wrong in the process. Punishment is retributive. It demands payment. It asks who made the error.
To build safety, then, you need to implement this autopsy without blame.
Turn failure into data, not condemnation.
We see that so clearly in the Peter and the charcoal fire example. Peter fails spectacularly and Jesus doesn't ignore it.
No, he recreates the scene of the failure, the charcoal fire, and uses that exact moment to recommission him.
So forgiveness in that context actually strengthened Peter's identity and his capacity to lead.
Yes, the team needs to know that when they fail, they're getting data and a recommissioning, not condemnation and a pink slip.
And finally, we have to talk about margin. The shepherd's pace. You just can't run at full capacity forever.
You have to be intentional about it. Jacob, in Genesis, he refused to match Esau's aggressive pace. He says, "The children are tender. If they are driven hard just one day, all the animals will die.
The resources, the people will break.
They will break." Resilience requires explicitly staffing and scheduling for, say, 85% capacity. That 15% of slack isn't wasted time.
It's the load-bearing element that lets you handle a crisis without collapsing.
It's a design feature, not a bug.
Okay, so if we agree on these new architectural blueprints that resilience is relational, it's vulnerable, it's structurally designed, what are the immediate actionable tools we can apply?
We can leverage the Nehemiah principle as a four-step framework for handling a crisis. First, Nehemiah validated the threat. He acknowledged the danger, the despair.
He didn't pretend it wasn't happening.
No. Second, he reorganized for safety, and this is crucial. He positioned people by their families. He leveraged existing social bonds of trust.
That's fascinating. So in a crisis, instead of just assigning roles based on technical skill, you prioritize existing relational strength first?
Absolutely. Third, he refocused on the Lord. He constantly reminded the team of the great and awesome why behind their mission.
And finally,
He modeled vigilance. He worked right alongside them, weapon at his side. Resilience is built by increasing support and structure, not by pretending the threat isn't there.
that gives us a process. Now, let's give the listener 3 immediate diagnostic metrics. How can you measure your team's psychological safety right now?
The first is the silence gap. How quickly does bad news travel up to leadership?
So if I, as a leader, hear about a major problem from social media before my own team tells me,
The silence gap is too long. Trust is critically low.
that is a brutal but very clear metric. What's the second one?
The laughter index. How frequent is genuine, unforced laughter in your high-pressure meetings?
Laughter as a physiological signal that the amygdala is relaxed.
Exactly. It shows the team feels safe enough to be human.
Yeah.
If your budget meeting is dead silent and solemn, you have a safety issue.
And the final metric, the no ratio.
How often does the team push back or disagree with the leader's plan? Not argumentative defiance, but thoughtful challenge. If that ratio of no or I see a risk here is 0/4, fear is absolutely present. You have idolatry of agreement.
Okay, to put muscle on these findings, we need exercises. You mentioned 2 that build resilience in real time.
The first is the river crossing exercise. You get the team to map its own history of rapids past crises and then identify the rocks,
The anchors, the people, the relationships that help them survive.
right? It demonstrates explicitly that resilience is relational, not just technical. And the second is the user manual exercise. Have everyone write a short manual for themselves.
A user manual for a person.
Yes. Detailing their communication style, their triggers under stress, and how they prefer to receive critique. This builds cognitive empathy.
So suddenly a colleague isn't being difficult.
They're just communicating according to a wiring that you now understand.
These tools help us step away from frustration and judgment and move toward understanding and collective strength. So the fundamental shift here is really clear. We have to stop aiming for the brittle, flawless, perfect team that only exists in theory.
And we embrace the messiness, the reality of shared struggle and shared strength.
Right.
And we can synthesize this with the Japanese art of Kintsugi. This is the practice where broken pottery is repaired with lacquer mixed with powdered gold.
And they don't try to hide the break.
No, they highlight the cracks. They make the vessel more beautiful and more valuable because it has survived and been repaired.
Your team, your organization, it's not some pristine marble temple of corporate perfection.
No.
It's a Kintsugi vessel, held together by these gold veins of grace and collective honesty.
Mm.
And when the world looks at a truly resilient team, they shouldn't just see excellence. The world has plenty of shiny, brittle excellence.
They should look at your team and see resurrection.
Proof that the worst happened, and yet they stand. Stronger and infinitely more beautiful for the struggle they endured together.
And we establish that true organizational resilience, it grows from collective strength and visible vulnerability, starting with the leader. So here's the question for you to mull over.
Okay.
What specific flaw, weakness, or past failure are you currently trying to hide from your team? And what golden opportunity for shared healing, for building that deeper Kintsugi-level trust, are you missing by not exposing the crack?